Hi everyone, welcome back to Beyond PG. I'm Addy.
I'm Ben, and today we're doing an extra long edition of Beyond PG where we're going to discuss the entire James Bond series.
Yep, 25 in all.
Yeah, this is a huge undertaking, right? Like, that's a lot of movies. Addy, when we set out to watch these movies, what were some of your thoughts? Did you know about James Bond before?
I only remember one thing about James Bond that I've ever seen before, and it was that part in Dr. No with the tarantula in the bed. I somehow glimpsed it, and that stuck with me. I actually kind of proposed the idea of watching Bond Marathon.
Yeah, and I think that Bond used to be such a staple because it was on TV all the time when I was growing up. Even movies that I thought I hadn't seen, once we started watching them, I realized, oh, I've seen them. What did you think, having watched all the movies? What is your impression of Bond, the series?
I actually really enjoyed watching it. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite thing ever, but I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, and you know there are some problems with Bond, right? There's some problems with Bond in 2020, and the newer films get better about it. But even the Pierce Brosnan films are really kind of problematic in some ways. And I think that it's interesting to watch them all in a row because it sort of treats it like a study, right? It's almost like we were kind of studying these movies. We were talking about what was happening in them. We were talking about how it was sort of changing over time. You know, Moneypenny transitions from this sort of doting secretary who, you know, just always wants James Bond to take her out on a date to someone who is almost, it's the other way around, where she's doing important work and Bond is annoying her, basically. I think it's important to talk about the fact that certainly you could look at the violence and racism and bigotry in there, but the thing that stands out the most is probably the womanizing. It really was kind of bad. What did you think about those scenes and just that whole dynamic?
I feel like maybe people thought differently back then, but I feel like it could have done without the whole thing. Like, as we went on, there were actually some really cool Bond girls, and
it gets better, and you know there are definitely some smart choices people have made. That still continues to be part of it. One of the things I liked the least about Skyfall was the way Severine was treated in that, and it still is somewhat icky. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that for a huge chunk of American, I guess Western society, you know, males like me, for us, Bond was such a idealized persona, right? And in some ways, it's not bad to want to be kind of like James Bond. You know, the guy who can ski, he can shoot, he can hunt, he can scuba dive, he can spacewalk. You know, somebody who's sort of unflappable, who rises to the occasion, who gets through it, who is creative, and clearly very bright and intelligent. There's a lot to admire about James Bond, but that one piece, unfortunately, is also something that people, you know, my age grew up admiring. You know, the scenes with the women were something to sort of make jokes about and to sort of look up to in some ways. And I think hopefully we've learned as a society and grown. We're certainly not done with that. We'll have a ways to go, but hopefully the way new generations are going to come at this material will be better and a little bit more evolved than we grew up with. So I think it's important to acknowledge that up front. But it was interesting, and I do think if you're going to watch it with your family, with your kids, watching them all in a row is kind of helpful because it sort of allows you to compare and to point out the problems that they have. You know, point out the problems of Live and Let Die, for instance, and the other ones that just really are signs of their time and need to be critiqued and addressed. So that said, what are we going to do today?
well, today's going to be a little bit different because we are doing what we are going to call the Bondy Awards.
All right, so welcome to the Bondies. Addy, you can kind of be the MC. We're going to be discussing a number of awards here. I hope in the comments you'll solve any arguments that we have and vote for who you think was right, or if there's something that we missed, add in the comments what you think some of your Bondy awards would be. We'd love to see those.
Yes. So our first award is, there are, I think, 6 Bonds, actors who play Bond. I think that the best Bond out of those 6 actors is Daniel Craig, the final Bond.
Why do you think he's the best Bond?
I think it just has a balance between the cheesiness. He's not really funny in like catch lines and stuff. He's funny in kind of like an ironic way. Like
dry humor. Daniel Craig is probably one of the better actors who's played Bond, and his Bond is a better character. He seems to have a little bit of a backstory. Things actually affect him. But I would argue that the best Bond has to be Sean Connery. Sean Connery's Bond is not actually much of a character. He's more of a cartoon. he's the quintessential, So I gotta go with Connery. But I do think that Craig is probably the better actor, and the Craig Bond movies are probably better moved.
Next is the best M. I thought it was Judi Dench because she also had kind of like a dry humor. And she was the first female. First female
M, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the first female main characters. I love the old guy who played M throughout most of the series.
Yeah.
I love just how he just was always so annoyed at Bond. If you go back and watch him, watch how annoyed M is at Bond the whole time. He's so annoyed the whole time. All right, the next award was for best Q.
I like the last Q that there is, Ben Whishaw, I think is how I'm saying. And because he's actually a character in the movies.
That's not why you like that Q.
Shush.
That's not why you like that Q. The new Q is definitely the cutest Q. Yes. But I think Desmond Llewellyn has to be the best Q. He was
the funniest, definitely.
Yeah, he was always funny. He took his work very seriously.
It was one part that you always had to look forward to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Whenever the Q scene started, you always kind of relaxed a little bit, and you could just sort of enjoy it, and it was fun.
Yeah. And he's always annoyed at Bond as well.
Now, not a lot of viewers will be able to name very many versions of Moneypenny, but we have the best Moneypenny award because there are several, especially with the Craig iteration.
Yeah, there's at least 5.
Yeah.
I think my favorite Moneypenny was Samantha Bond, ironically.
She was the Moneypenny in the Pierce Brosnan.
Probably one of the funniest Moneypennies, especially with that last scene of her in the last Pierce Brosnan movie, virtual reality glasses. She put it to where
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was good.
I'm not gonna spoil anything. But
She was a reflection of the 90s in that era some ways because she sort of gave Bond grief for some of his lesser qualities. Now we wouldn't want to just sort of joke away the way Bond mistreats people, but then that's kind of what we did. Yeah, she was good. I'm going to pass on this award. Another recurring character, Felix Leiter.
There are so many Felix Leiters. There's 10 of them. Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
Jeffrey Wright, probably.
Oh, he's great. Jeffrey Wright's great. I do think, though, I don't necessarily know what actor it is, but my favorite Felix Leiter is always the Felix Leiter that stays in the van. It's like half of the movies, Felix is just in the van or in the airplane or in the boat, just letting Bond do all the work.
Yeah.
He's just radioing things in, which I think maybe is a commentary on the Americans. We're all always hiding behind their technology, and it's the Brits in there doing the work. I don't know.
This is a family favorite, definitely, in my opinion. The best henchman. I think we all have to agree that it's Jaws.
I'm not gonna lie, in Moonraker, when Jaws actually has a line and a love story, I kind of had forgotten all of that, and we loved it. We were all cracking up, and we were cheering for Jaws. You know what I mean? To make it through, and I totally didn't expect that. I remember that from my original watchings. But I'm gonna give a couple honorable mentions. One for Xenia Onatopp, played by Famke Janssen, who's amazing, and she was one of the most deranged henchmen in GoldenEye. She was so kind of sick and evil, and even the main villains. Both the main villains, they would all kind of look at her with a side eye oh my gosh. I'll also say that Benicio del Toro's henchman character in License to Kill was also very good. He's actually kind of instrumental to the plot because he gets in a fight with Bond early on and then later on sees Bond undercover and is wait, I know that guy.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, he just seems like a character that has his own story. I almost kind of wondered what's that guy up to when he's not on screen. Moving on, best Bond girl, which that name is a little bit dismissive, right? Bond girl, but that's what it is. But best female counterpart to Bond in these movies. Well, how do you even go about deciding in this area? Because it's such a range. There's so many different types of Bond girl. There's the damsel in distress, right? There's the sort of equal partner, right? Well, who are your favorites?
I think one of my favorite Bond girls was Carrie Llewell, who was the Bond girl in License to Kill. And I think my favorite thing about her was that she was actually you couldn't really tell if she was good or bad. We saw her with one of the bad guys. We saw her like take out a bunch of people in a bar.
Yeah, she had a shotgun under the table.
Yeah, it was like huge.
She was basically Han Solo.
Yes.
She was a smuggler. She had a gun hidden under the table.
Yep.
She was bad at talking herself out of situations, but she somehow made it out on top. Yeah, okay. She may be my favorite now that we've discovered that connection. I have two favorites. One is Camille, Olga Kurylenko in Quantum of Solace. Now, you know this. I really like Quantum of Solace. Not a lot of people like Quantum of Solace. I really like that movie. I agree that the direction, particularly in the fight scenes, is problematic and somewhat nauseating. But I really like that movie, and particularly the performances in it. Unless I'm mistaken, Camille is one of the only Bond women who Bond doesn't have any sort of romantic, intimate interaction with, if I remember correctly. She has her own mission. She has her own agenda. She's an ally to Bond. She gets caught up in his scheme, but she stands on her own. She has a kind of a character arc in the movie. I really liked her. I thought she was great. I also want to point out Melina in For Your Eyes Only. You know, For Your Eyes Only is another one of my favorites.
Yeah,
And she was great. So she went to go kill the bad guy because the bad guy killed her parents. She goes into the Alps to follow a lead. She's a underwater diving expert.
Yeah.
She's in the entire movie just about. She's awesome. I thought she was really great.
Let's just talk about one more thing with Bond girls, though. There is one that we all are kind of like, she all kind of annoys us a lot, and it's Bibi Dahl.
Yeah, Bibi Dahl, also in For Your Eyes Only. Admittedly, one of the most grating characters, but I think kind of on purpose.
Yeah.
Bond, to his credit, Roger Moore, who's ancient by the time this movie is made, to his credit, he dismisses her and pushes her away.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's terrible. Also, one of the more maligned Bond girls was Dr. Christmas Jones, I think.
Oh.
Denise Richards' character, which in hindsight, it wasn't that bad. It was just it was a badly written movie from her perspective, and she was poorly cast. That was just a bad casting call. Denise Richards, no shame on her. She did what she could. That was pretty bad casting, I think, on that piece.
Yeah.
All right, what about best villain?
I have kind of like a villain pair where together they probably make like the funniest, and I don't know. I just immediately thought of Scaramounder and Knick Knack in Man with the Golden Gun.
I think that my favorite Bond villain goes back to the second movie. It was Robert Shaw's character, Red Grant, and we see him in the opening scene of the movie taking out someone disguised as Bond in a training activity.
Oh.
He doesn't really speak through the entire film, and at the end he speaks and you realize he's British. I sort of assumed he was Russian or something the entire time. He's big and blonde,
Because he's a part of Spectre, and that isn't really like a country.
Yeah, and so he's revealed to be British. He's kind of got Bond's number. He plays everybody for a fool. He would have totally won if he didn't sit around and talk too much. It's an incredible fight at the end. He's a great sort of doppelganger for James Bond. He's equally as sort of smart and smooth and ruthless. I think he's my favorite. I wish he would have somehow been in more of the movies, or if they would have somehow found a way to reboot him in the Craig series. I thought that was great. And of course, Robert Shaw's amazing.
Yeah.
What about the movie awards?
Well, let's start with the plots. I think one of the best plot, like just throughout the movie, the most clear and concise and consistent thing was Goldfinger.
Yeah, Goldfinger could have been not a James Bond movie. Goldfinger just could have been a Mission Impossible. It could have been any sort of action movie. It really stood on its own. It didn't need to have all the Bond packaging, though that stuff was fun as well. It was a tight movie. It was very tight. His plan actually kind of made sense.
Yeah.
You didn't necessarily want him to win, but you were kind of like, okay, that's pretty smart. I think Thunderball has the best plot. As you're watching it, it's kind of weird, but if you just hear it sort of play out, it's incredible. He starts out at like a recovery center, and then he ends up in the Caribbean, and the bad guy has crash landed a jet that has nuclear missiles in it. And for some reason, he takes like a month to get him transitioned to the bad guy or something. You've got Domino's, a cool character whose brother was caught up in this and killed. And then ultimately it ends in an epic underwater battle.
The next villain plan, I'm again gonna have to give this to Goldfinger, because like the gas with the planes knocked everybody out, but then the pilot was a good person and she switched it out with just air, and then it was like everybody was pretending and they set up all these fake car crashes, and I thought it was just great.
It was a smart plot by the villains, and then actually the good guys had a smart plan to foil it, right? That's kind of rare. Usually Bond kind of fails his way into success in these movies. I think for best villain plot, I'm going to give it to two movies. The World Is Not Enough, Electric King's plot. I like it because it was both sort of a world domination plot through economic systems. You know, a lot of these villains use capitalism. Did you ever notice that? It's sort of a world domination plot and also a revenge plot. It was like 2 in 1. Of course, ultimately that's why she failed, right? But she's trying to get M and MI6 back for abandoning her as a kidnapped child.
Yes.
And she's also trying to take over the world's oil supply. So I like that. I also like Quantum's plan in Quantum of Solace to monopolize the water supply in Bolivia, I guess it was. I think that just sounds like a plan that actually probably some sort of actual current person is doing because they're evil. That seems like very fitting for the Daniel Craig movies. It's this kind of like realistic thing that probably could happen, and it would be part of a larger system of evil doings. It's not very flashy, but it's kind of like, oh, they've got the water supply. Like that's pretty ruthless. What about the most emotional scene?
Well, it's from one of the movies that not a lot of people know. It was the only one that you hadn't seen before. It's actually one of my favorites, and I think the most emotional scene is when Bond's wife dies at the end of the movie.
Yeah, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He meets his kind of equal, falls in love, gets married, retires, and then immediately she's assassinated. And I'm not gonna lie, we were kind of like choking up a little bit.
Yeah, it was just me and him. Yeah, it was.
It was emotional. It was emotional. You know, Bond was a real character who was affected by the events around him in this movie in a way that we hadn't seen before. Apparently, George Lazenby lied his way into the role and pretended to be some sort of big actor in Australia, and they hired him and then realized later that he was sort of a nobody. I thought he was an interesting Bond. I think he played it really interesting. I would have liked to see him in a few more Bonds.
Yeah.
The action was shot in a weird way, but it still had skiing.
It had skiing.
So that was good.
It was the first skiing.
The villain's plan was weird. Bond actually, the plot required Bond to sort of like kind of seduce a bunch of women, but he didn't want to. He was really reluctant to.
He was questioning them.
Yeah, he wasn't wanting to do it, but he was sort of like, okay, you know. It's really interesting. It's another one that's really worth another look. I'll say also a couple other emotional scenes in a series that's not really known for them. The death of M in Skyfall, that was emotional. And I would also say, Timothy Dalton's Bond movies are not that great, but when Felix Leiter and his wife are attacked at the beginning of License to Kill, that was pretty emotional.
Yeah, you cannot get married if you're an MI6 agent.
Yeah.
Or in the CIA.
Yeah. What about best action scene?
My favorite action scene was from For Your Eyes Only. This one's getting mentioned a lot. Whenever the villain got hold of them and he handcuffed them together. Well, not really handcuffed, like tied them together. And then dragged them through a coral reef. And they were like hitting rocks and like, it was insane.
Yeah, that was cool. But and then he had to like wrap it around the thing and then stay underwater. Luckily, she had left a tank down there. Remember, for some reason, she had taken off her tank earlier and left it down there.
Yeah.
I like the skiing in For Your Eyes Only as well. I thought that was a great scene. I think that Skyfall has 2 or 3 really great action scenes. The end scene is good. His fight with the assassin is good. And the beginning of Skyfall, when he gets on the train and he uses the crane to hook onto the train car.
Yes.
And he jumps in the train and he like straightens up his cuffs. You know what I mean?
And then he gets shot.
And then Moneypenny shoots him. Yeah, that was a cool action scene. I like that. He gets on the motorcycle. That's in a motorcycle. That's it. That's my favorite one. Beginning of Skyfall, I think, is my favorite action scene. Several Pierce Brosnan scenes get a runner-up. The beginning of Goldeneye gets a runner-up.
Yeah, that one's good.
Yeah.
I think Actually, for my favorite movie, that has to be one of my honorable mentions, Goldeneye.
Goldeneye's good. Goldeneye's very solid. What about best battle? So there's fights and there's action scenes, but some of these movies have full-on battles. The worst is probably the volcano lair battle of You Only Live Twice. In my running for worst Bond movie, what was the best battle?
In my opinion, it was when they went up to Moonraker and they came out in astronaut suits and they were floating in space, which is not logical at all. But then they attacked each other in spacesuits.
It was crazy. That movie came out before the space shuttle was actually in use. That was an incredible scene. You also have Jaws playing a role at the end.
Yeah.
You know, you have space shuttle battles. It was crazy. Though I'm going to give it to the movie that actually was the first version of that battle, which is Thunderball. The space battle in Moonraker is basically a repeat of the underwater battle in Thunderball, and both of them have that same moment where you're like, wait a minute. We got like whole armies battling here. All of a sudden, all these people come out of nowhere with scuba tanks.
And it looks only like 50 people on each side, but it seems to be like...
Yeah, where you're like, wait a minute, there's like a bunch of these guys, and they got scuba tanks / jetpacks. They've got spear guns / laser guns. It was crazy. It was crazy. I'd forgotten about both of those rewatching them. Because when you think about the Craig movies, like that just would never happen.
Yeah.
And those were fun, and I like those. And your 8-year-old brother absolutely loved.
Yeah, that was the only one which he didn't fall asleep.
He loved both those. He loved Thunderball so much. All right, best villain versus Bond line. I'm gonna give you the last one here, the last word on this. But I think that villain versus Bond is probably Red Grant, Robert Shaw's character, in the train at the end of From Russia with Love. That was so good. It was such a great fight scene. The train car gets absolutely demolished. Robert Shaw's great. I can't remember the exact lines, but he's got some good lines in there, just calling Bond old boy and all this stuff. What about you? Best villain versus Bond?
It was in Goldfinger. As you can tell, this is one of the favorites. Bond was like strapped to the thing, he was about to get lasered because he can't be killed by a gun. And
yeah, it's gotta be a dramatic.
Yeah, it's gotta be something very complicated. And he's like, do you expect MI6 just to or he says something like that. And Goldfinger says back as he's walking up the stairs, he's like, no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. And I think that was one of the things where it was like, Goldfinger's kind of really bad.
Yeah.
And so is our best movie that we thought was out of the 25 movies that we watched. I'm gonna have to give it to Casino Royale. It was all centered around the poker game. It was at the end, he was like, I'm quitting, but then he's like, nope, I'm not quitting because I
kill Mr. White. Casino Royale's solid. It's solid. It's got some great action scenes. That parkour scene in the beginning is really good.
Yeah.
Somehow the card game is really engaging and interesting. He gets poisoned.
And then suddenly Felix Leiter jumps back in there, and I don't think he was in the last couple movies.
Yeah, that was cool. That was his reintroduction. Yeah. Also, Casino Royale has one of the most amazing but also shortest car chase scenes. He's in the car for just a short, tiny amount of time, and then the crash because Vesper's in the road. I mean, that was incredible. This is incredible action in the movie. I'm going with For Your Eyes Only. I love this Bond movie. It's got everything. It's got everything I like. It's got a skiing scene, probably the best skiing scene, right? Anytime a Bond movie has a skiing scene, it's immediately 30% better. It's got complex underwater scuba diving and demolition going on. It's got a villain who you think is a good guy, and so Bond's having like brunch with the dude, and then later he realizes he's the bad guy. It's got four-wheelers on the beach. It's got maybe the best final scene. Oh, he's got an ally. I love it in these Bond movies where they end up having like an ally and they fight as a team. It's got the Greek guys, the ally. I love the final sort of assault on the tower fortress. It's just something we haven't seen in these movies a lot. That was super cool. He's like mountain climbing and he almost falls and like that. It's great. It's got everything you want in a Bond movie. Roger Moore actually his age kind of works to the advantage of the movie somehow for the first and only time. Yeah, For Your Eyes Only. Revisit it. It's good. It's good if you're willing to have a good time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Addy, final thoughts. Would you recommend folks to check out the Bond franchise?
If you don't have the patience for it, I don't think you would really appreciate any of it because you would just remember the bad ones. But, I was the only one who really watched all of them. Sometimes my siblings would go off. My mom and dad had already seen them, so some of my mom went off and my dad fell asleep.
Maybe. Yeah, I think that there are some bad ones. There's some really bad movies. Live and Let Die is bad. View to a Kill is bad. Diamonds Are Forever is bad. There's a bunch of bad ones. So I think if you want to watch them all, it's fun. If you want to watch just a few, I think you go Dr. No, you go Rush It With Love, you go
That's actually one of my least
Thunderball.
favorites.
Yeah, I like it. You need it for Shaw. You need it for Upper Shaw.
Yeah.
You definitely go Man with the Golden Gun. You go For Your Eyes Only. I think you skip Timothy Dalton and you go Golden Eye. World Is Not Enough.
And
Tomorrow
then you
Never
do
Dies,
like
and then-
almost
and
all
then
the
Craig.
Daniel Craig's.
Yeah. So that's still like 12 movies or something I just named. So,
Yeah.
well, we hope you check it out. The main thing is if you're going to watch these movies, go into it to have some fun. They're silly. Just have fun with it, and I think that it'll be worth spending. So.
Yep. Well, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Yep. Tell us what you thought about these movies in the comments below. Take care.
Bye.